learners. I am Dr. Amuda from School of Management, Sastra University. I welcome to the session Vendor Rate. We shall see in this session the significance of the assessment of the vendor. As we have already seen about the sourcing of vendors and how to select the vendors. Now we will see how to assess the vendors. The assessment of the vendors can be made through the plant visit by the manufacturer or the purchaser. The buyer would do well to visit the plant of the suppliers in order to make a first-hand assessment of his or her capabilities and evaluate his or her suitability. So when the purchaser, namely the manufacturer, is going to visit the place of the supplier, namely the vendor, he can assess the technical feasibility, the financial feasibility, and the labor skill available in the supplier's place, and the raw materials that are being stored there, and what will be the feasibility of continuous supply of the components or the spare parts. So the assessment and evaluations can be easily made when the plant visits are made by the purchaser. Let us now see how these plant visits have been made by the purchaser. The first and the foremost aspect to be noted is the facilities that are available in the suppliers. First, the plant and equipment will be assessed. How far the plant and equipments are said to be modernized, how they are technically feasible. Suppose if the plant and equipments are not that much technically sound or which is not updated technically, then the purchasing department manager can ask the supplier to update his own equipment and the plants. And if he feels satisfactory, then he will place an order. And suppose if he is not satisfied up to the level of the technical know-how available in the supplier's place, then he may give instructions regarding his expectations of the technical knowledge or the technical feasibility that is expected by the purchasing department. And once again, how far the components can be manufactured within the supplier's place. Now, what will be the facilities for the manufacture of the components? So before giving these components to the suppliers, first of all, the manufacturer or the purchasing department manager, in a very large concern, will have the purchasing department manager. Otherwise, if it is a medium size or a small size concern, the manufacturer himself will appoint a purchase officer, and this purchase officer will evaluate the cost of producing the components or the spare parts within the concern, or if it is purchased from outside. Then they will decide whether to buy from the market or to produce it within. And once again, not only the price, the quality of the spare parts and the components should also be taken into account. Suppose if the items are to be purchased from outside, if the purchase price is considered to be lesser than the cost of manufacture, then in this case, they have to decide whether the components are said to be critical or not. Suppose if it is said to be critical, then he has to see about the continuous supply of those components or the spare parts. And once again, the quality should also be taken into consideration. Then, the purchase manager must look into the maintenance schedules of the supplier. What will be the maintenance procedure of the plants and equipments in the supplier's place? If there is a regular maintenance, or if it is a breakdown maintenance, or it may be said to be a maintenance when it has been a breakdown, or if it is a regular basis. Now the department staff have to see about the maintenance procedure of the supplier and see to it whether these maintenance programs are as per the expectations of the purchasing department. Suppose if the supplier is going to have only the maintenance breakdowns. Say if the breakdowns have happened in the supplier's place, then that will be made correct by the supplier only if it happens. So in this case, it is called as the breakdown maintenance. If in this procedure is followed, then the manufacturer has to say the scientific method of maintenance, the periodical method of maintenance should be made in the supplier's place to have a continuous flow or a smooth flow of the raw materials or the spare parts or the components. Say for example, if the supplier is having a breakdown maintenance and he will supply the materials as per his maintenance schedule, and this will affect the supply of the raw materials if there is a breakdown, unexpected breakdown during the supply. So he may have a time gap or he may have a break in the supply of the materials. So this will affect the production of the manufacturer's place also. So in this case, the purchasing manager has to insist or he has to instruct the supplier that he must have a periodical maintenance and he must have a scientific maintenance of the plant and equipment so that the continuous supply of the materials can be made. And once again, the size and the capacity of the production should also be taken into consideration. What is the size and the capacity of the production? The supplier's production size, the total production units that can be made during a particular period. It may be a month or a year or half yearly or a fortnight, etc. So what is his production size and what is his capacity? Say for example, he is having a utilized capacity of only 60%. So he may be having an idle capacity of 40%. So if you are going to increase the order, then he can manage with this idle capacity. Suppose he is having a fullest capacity to be utilized and is concerned, then the additional orders cannot be placed to him. So the size of the production and the capacity of the production to be taken care of when the purchase manager going for the additional orders. Now, the layout of the machines and the equipments of the supplier's place will also be considered. And once again, the general housekeeping and the cleanliness that are to be expected in the supplier's place. So all these things also the purchase manager has to see for it. We can ask, why should we go in for the general housekeeping and the cleanliness of the supplier's place? See, in case of pharmaceutical companies, the cleanliness and the housekeeping is very important to ensure the quality standards as per the good manufacturing practices GMP. So in this case, the cleanliness and the housekeeping should also be considered in the supplier's place. So when we go in for the facilities of the supplier's place, the purchase manager have to see to the technology or the modernization of the plant and equipment, and next one is what is the quality of the spare parts or the components that is needed, and the maintenance schedules, whether it is a regular maintenance or a breakdown maintenance, and the capacity of the production, what is the actual capacity and what is the installed capacity. Then the general housekeeping, cleanliness and the layout of the machines also. The second component or the second factor to be considered in case of the plant visit is the production staff, the labor who is engaged in the production. So we call it as operating staff. All these operating staff should be qualified and experienced. So the required skill must be there with the qualified staff. The supplier has to appoint only the labor who is having the requisite quality or the requisite qualification and the experience. Only a trained personnel in the technology with a great skill can go in for the good quality products. So this is said to be an important factor to be considered by the purchasing manager. So he has to go and evaluate the personnel who is directly engaged in the production, and he has to evaluate his own skill, and if satisfied he can place an order. Suppose if the skill of the person is not up to the expectation of the manufacturing concern, then the purchase manager can also extend their own training facilities to the personnel who are engaged in the supplier's place. And this is the basic relationship that exists between a vendor-vendee, as we seen it in the last session. That is, the good vendor-vendee relationship must be maintained. So if the supplier's personnel needs some technical training, or if they need some inputs regarding the technology, then the manufacturer can extend, or the purchasing manager can extend certain training facilities, and if they are not qualified for it, they can also engage some other outside agencies to give the training to those people. So only qualified personnel and the experienced personnel can make a good quality products and services. So this will have a significant impact on the quality of the output. Next is we have the quality control. This is said to be a main important aspect which draws the attention of the manufacturer. And this manufacturer will go to the supplier's place and they will go in for the inspection of the quality of the products that has been manufactured by the supplier. Because as we have already saw, the quality of the raw materials will decide about the quality of the finished goods. So this gives a significant attention, or the greatest attention manufacturer or the producing manager have to place over the supplier's place. Now we have a thorough inspection by the purchase manager, and this inspection will ensure the quality of the products to be manufactured. And we have to see about the various factors that are needed for the production of the quality goods. The purchasing manager has to look into the facilities of the suppliers that is available for the quality control. Whether there are some staff appointed in the quality control department of the supplier is said to be competent or not, and to whom they have to report. Whether they have to report to the production manager or the designing engineer, or if there is any possibility of influencing them. Now, the quality control department of the supplier's place should act as an independent department, and it must have the 100% power to reject the quality of the products which is not up to the mark. So the quality control department should have an independent status to ensure the quality of the spare parts or the components or the products that are manufactured in the supplier's place. So the purchase department manager of a manufacturing concern must ensure that the quality control in the supplier's place is said to be available and it is functioning properly. And once again, the purchasing department has to ensure that the testing facilities available in the supplier's place is said to be adequate enough. And he has to measure or to guard against the testing equipments and the testing instruments existing in the supplier's place. And whether he has to see this equipments and the instruments that are available for the quality control is said to be modernized one, and it is up to the updated technology. And the supplier should also ensure that these equipments and instruments are maintained properly and they are corrected on a regular basis. And the quality control department manager of the supplier's concern should ensure and give a note that all the equipments and the instruments are in the working conditions and they are said to be regularly maintained and it is updated with the technologies. And once again, the supplier's place has to say that the production is inspected. Then in there, we have certain points of inspection. We have various stages of manufacture, and all these stages will have the inspection points, and the quality of the products is ensured throughout the process of production. So as and when we have the various stages of manufacture, or various process of manufacture. Say for example, in case of processing industries, we will have different stages of manufacture. So in this case, every stage the quality should be ensured. So the quality control department should go in for the control of the quality of the products at the different stages of manufacture to ensure the quality at the end. And once again, not only checking the quality of the manufacture at different stages, the records of maintenance should also be made. So all the records of quality control should be maintained in every point, and if needed, they should be checked and verified to see that whether the quality is checked properly or not. So these records will be proven records, and they are said to be the first-hand records, and they ensures a satisfactory system that is existing in the supplier's place. And these records should show that the product is conformed to every specification at each stages of manufacture. So slowly the quality is built and the final product is ensured with the sufficient quality or the expected quality. Suppose if the materials are rejected by the quality control department, then all these materials must be either reworked if possible, or it should be rectified if possible. If the reworking or rectification is not possible, then they should be properly discarded as per the norms. So this quality control department of the suppliers plays a very significant role in ensuring the quality of the products manufactured in their own place. For this purpose, the purchase manager should go and inspect the quality control department of the supplier's place, and they must ensure that the proper personnel, qualified and competent personnel, are engaged in the inspection, and the inspection is made at every stages of manufacture, and the proper records are being maintained for the quality control, and every stage the quality is ensured to the specifications mentioned. If the materials are not as per the quality control department specifications, then they must be rectified or reworked. If the rectification or reworking is not possible, then they can go in for the discard of the materials. The fourth significant factor, a manufacturing concern or a purchase department manager has to ensure is the proper industrial relations existing in the supplier's place. What is the industrial relations that is existing in the supplier's place is said to be an important question to be answered. Industrial relations, we mean the relations between the employer and the employer, employer and the employee, employee and the employee. So the proper working climate must be ensured. The smooth working climate should be ensured. And what is the relationship between the employer and the employee existing in the supplier's place? Is there any possibility of conducting any strikes or layoff or the lockouts, etc.? Say for example, if the worker is going in for the strikes, then the production will get hampered in the supplier's place. Once again, the supply of the products will be hindered. See, if the employer is going to have a layoff, is going to close down the business, then once again the production will get affected. So if there is no proper relationship between the employer and the employee in the vendor's place or the supplier's place, it will definitely affect the production of the supplier's place. If the production gets affected, then automatically the production at the manufacturer's place will also get affected. So proper industrial relations must be maintained in the supplier's place to ensure the smooth functioning of the production. One may ask, why should we are bothered about the employer's relationship in case of the supplier's place? It is not our botheration. It is a supplier's management botheration to ensure the proper relationship between themselves with the employees. Now we cannot say like this, because the vendor and the vendee relationship should be very cordial, and the vendor is said to be an important source of supply, and whatever happens in his vendor's place, definitely it will affect the vendee's place also. So they are interdependent with each other. That's why we are ensuring the relationship of the employer-employee in the supplier's place also. Next is we come with the customers. Who are said to be the customers of a company? How does the company sells its own products? What is the distribution network? What is the service outlet that is available? And who are all the persons engaged in the distribution? So these are the common questions to be answered, and these information is said to be more important as the other factors to be considered as we discussed. So the customers has to be satisfied. They must be delighted. How the customers will get delighted? Only by ensuring the quality of the goods and services. And only when your brand name or the brand image is strengthened by supplying the good quality products at a reasonable prices with a continuous supply, then your brand image or the company image will be built in the market. So that will also will increase your sales of the products. So we are going to engage, we are going to have a forward integration, the integration with the marketing intermediaries, the various service outlets. So this forward integration is also essential factor to be considered while we were assessing the vendors. Next comes the management. It is highly necessary to ascertain the level and the standard of management in the company. Why it is said to be a significant one? Because the standard of the management is going to decide about the level of production or the strategy engaged in the production. Normally, the trading and production will go hand in hand. Production is the producing goods and services, and trading is said to be the exchange of goods and services. We can put it in other words, it is industry and commerce. Industry is engaged in the production and commerce is engaged in the exchange of the produced goods and services. So this production and exchange will constitute a business. When we say business, trading and production are said to be the two basic components. Normally, the trading will depend upon the production, and the market, that is the place in which the goods are supplied, will definitely depend upon the production policies. So this production and trading should be go hand in hand, and the purchase manager is very much concerned with the selling of the products that are produced in the within the organization. And this genuine production business will not work unless the owner resorts what might be termed as unethical practices. So the company owner should not go in for the unethical practices, because if he go in for the unethical practices, definitely the production business will get affected. And he must have a craze over the supply of goods and services in a very high quality at a reasonable prices, taking into consideration the welfare of the customers. And once again, his main aim is to utilize the company to the fullest extent, that is to the optimum level of all the resources invested, to have the control over the cost of production also. So this is considered to be very important. The management strategy is considered to be very important in the vendor's assessment also. So in case of vendor's assessment, first one is they must have the plant visits with the vendors. While visiting the plant, the place of the vendors, then plant is a place where the production is carried on. So when the supplier's place or the plant is visited, the facilities that are existing, then the personnel who are engaged in the production, the quality control department of the supplier, then the personnel relations, that is the industrial relations existing in the supplier's place, then the customers who are all the customers of the product, end product, and once again the management of the manufacturing concern. So all these factors will decide upon the assessment of the vendors. While assessing the vendors, the registration form, supplier registration form, should be received from the prospective suppliers. The supplier's registration form will consist of the following information. First one is the name and addresses of the supplier. What is the name of the supplier's company and the registration number of the supplier's company, and the telephone number or the fax number, and you may have the email addresses, and the name and addresses of the proprietor if it is a sole trading concern, or if it is a corporate, the name and addresses of the executive director who is in charge of signing the contracts, and the name of the person to be contacted, the contact person's name, address, and his own telephonic information, because the director or the proprietor will sign the MOU, that is the contract, only at the end, only after the negotiations are being made. So you must have the name of the contact person, and what is the nature of the articles or nature of the items or the components for which the registration is sought. And if a manufacturer is for the article, and that is if the supplier is a manufacturer of a particular article, then the number of employees involved and what is the production capacity of the item. Production capacity, if it is given, the supplier has to give what is the installed capacity and what is the utilized capacity. So if the supplier is said to be a manufacturer of an article, he has to say what is the number of employees engaged in the production and how many of them are skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled, and the production capacity of the particular item. If the supplier happen to be a subcontractor, then he has to give the location of the factory, where this factory is located, and the details regarding the plant and equipment. Details regarding the plant and equipment here, what is the technical know-how of the plant and equipment and the plant and machinery, and what is the lifetime of the machinery, what is the installed capacity of the machinery, and he has to say for which item, if the machinery is said to be a multi-purpose machinery, the item to which the contract is to be made. Suppose if it is a single purpose machine, then you can easily identify the item to be manufactured, and the number of employees and the production capacity of the concern, and whether the raw materials are required from the parent unit or the subcontracting units will themselves go in for the purchase of the raw materials. So if the supplier is said to be a subcontractor, then they have to say the details regarding the factory location, plant details, the machinery details, the personnel involved, the production capacity, and whether they require the technical know-how or the raw materials or some other facilities needed. So in case of subcontracting, the main unit or the parent unit will extend its own support regarding the technical feasibility or the technical know-how, and suppose if the labor needs any training, then the labor will be given, and once again if any raw materials, specialized raw materials are needed, then the raw materials are also supplied. If the supplier happens to be a distributor, we have to say whether he is a sole selling agent or not. If the sole selling agent here means the agent will sell only particular brand of the items, he won't go in for the next brand. Suppose if he is not a sole selling agent, then he will deal with the multiple brands. Then the number of employees they are engaged in the distributor's place, and the value of stock that is generally held. What is the level of stock generally held? So the level of stock that is held by the distributor will decide about the continuous supply of the goods. Then if the supplier happens to be a stockist will be a level more than the distributor, super stockist. Then they have to say about the size of the store in place and the number of items they are generally having, and what is the approximate value of the items they are storing it in their own stores. Then if the supplier is a well-known person, then he can be easily selected. Suppose if it is a new to the market or new to the business, then some references must be given of the other buying companies, and these references will be of immense help to the purchase department to know about the viability of the supplier's place. And once again, the name and addresses of the bankers, they are attached to it. So this will decide about the financial capacity of the supplier's concerned. So this supplier registration form is very important because the supplier will have to register with the purchasing department manager, and they have to inform themselves that they are in the market and they are with the particular items to supply. Then this will be of a source of information to the purchase department manager to evaluate them. So put it in a nutshell, the supplier registration form will composed of the names and addresses of the supplier, the telephonic information, email information, the name of the proprietor or executive director, then the name of the contact person, then the nature of the articles, then if he is a manufacturer, he has to decide about the number of employees and the production capacity he has to inform. Then subcontractor, then he has to say about the location, the details of the plant and machinery, number of employees, and the support he needs from the parent unit. Then if he is a distributor, he has to say whether he is a sole selling agent or he is dealing with multiple products, and he has to say about the level of stock he is going to hold it. Then if he is a super stockist, he has to say about the size of the firm and the number of items that are generally held and the value of the items that are being maintained by him. Then the references of the person should also be given, and the name and addresses of the banker should be given to know about the financial position of those suppliers. Now this sourcing of the suppliers is said to be an important decision of any purchase manager, and he has to see that the source of supply should be nearby his plant. Only then it will be advantageous one for them to have the minimization of the transportation cost. And it is also found advantageous to have more than one source of supply for the many important production materials. Suppose we call it as vital items. With vital items, women, the items are highly essential, without which the production cannot run continuously. Suppose if these items are missing, the production will get hampered even for an hour or for a day. So these items are said to be vital items. In case of vital items, the purchase department manager must have more than one source of supply, because if any particular supplier is not in a position to supply those items, then he can find another source of supply to fill in the gap. And this can be managed by dividing the orders of the required quantity in small lots, and it should be placed with this, 2 to 3 suppliers, so that the suppliers will supply it in rotation and the production will not get hampered in the manufacturer's place. And once again, even the purchase department is going in for the purchase of these items from one or more suppliers, then this will also encourage the competition among themselves. And once again, we will have the negotiations with those suppliers, and the suppliers will also try to ensure the quality of the products, and once again they will go in for the discounts on the other benefits of the large scale purchasing. Suppose if any one particular supplier is facing a labor problem or a shortage of the raw materials or some other machinery breakdown in their own place, in this case having more than one suppliers will be beneficial, because if one supplier is not in a position to supply, then the manufacturer or the purchase manager can go in for the purchase of the same materials from the other suppliers. See, at the same time, it is said that certain commodities buying from a one source may result in quantity discounts, and we have the trade discounts, and we have the lowest packing charges, transportation charges. So we have many benefits of having a single source and relying on the single source, having a reputation of a supplier, in supplying the materials. Though we have many advantages of having a single source, then it is beneficial for any purchase department to have more than one source to avoid the opposite mishappenings in the supplier's place. Happenings here when the labor strike or the power cuts or some other raw material shortage problems, machinery breakdown problems, some non-availability of the skilled laborers. So these will affect the production of a particular supplier's place. So in this case, the purchase manager should have another source so that the continuous supply of the materials is ensured for the production. For the repetitive purchases, the factors to be taken into consideration are the adherence to the promise, and then the various help that is rendered to come out of the critical positions, and again the maintenance of the quality and the lowest rate of the rejection of the supplies and the promptness of the replacement and the price fluctuations shown in case of the shortage in the supplies, etc. So these will decide about the repetitive purchases. Repetitive purchases here means that we will have the common items to be purchased periodically without any changes. Say some normal items or some items are to be purchased periodically, and it will be placed with the supplier, and it is a monthly basis or fortnight basis or yearly basis. So in this case, the adherence to the promises and what is the quality to be maintained, and the rate of rejections and the price fluctuations to be followed in case of the shortages of the materials, and the promptness of replacements, which will be replacements in case of rejections, that will decide about the selection of the supplier. The purchase section should always look out for a cheaper but reliable sources of supply. Cheaper supply here among the negotiations regarding the ordering cost and the transportation cost, price discounts, trade discounts, etc. So when there are too many prospective suppliers for one commodity, it may be necessary to keep some of them in the waiting list. So we can have some proven suppliers, and we can have the supply of the materials to the organization. Sometimes the waiting list will also be prepared. If any one of the supplier in the first list is said to be a grey list suppliers, the suppliers who are defaulting, then the waiting list suppliers can be taken into consideration. Then we have to place the orders to those suppliers. Then indiscriminate addition of the suppliers will only spoil the healthy competition and increase the number of sundry creditors in the accounts ledger without frequent transactions with it. So a maximum of 8 to 12 suppliers for each group of commodities will be the fair limit. So having more than one suppliers will definitely help the manufacturing concern to have an effective control over the supply of the materials. So a vendor is a faction in the supply chain that makes goods and services accessible to the organizations or the consumers. The word vendor is used to explain the entity that is paid for the goods and services. Normally, evaluating a vendor is very crucial as it reduces the supply chain costs and enhances the quality and timeliness of the delivery. The ultimate objective of vendor evaluation or the vendor assessment is to ensure a low-risk, best-in-class vendor and supplier portfolio. There has been a considerable growth in the industries across the globe, and this rapid progression have led to the increased competition in the market. The high value of the vendor's products is said to be a significant factor to the success of the company's quality control function. The quality commitment of the vendors is considered to be highly indispensable in this competitive world. To attain the goals of the company through this quality assurance or quality control, it is important to issue some procedures or some instructions for the evaluation, approval and auditing of the incoming materials from the suppliers or the vendors. It is well realized that supplier evaluation and audits is considered to be an integral part of the assessment in any type of industry or an organization. As the entire industry routine depends on the type of materials supplied for the production, there are raw materials which only shape up to the actual end product or the final product. So it is a necessity to guarantee that the person who is supplying the raw material in industry is of good quality and standard, and the materials as they supply comply with all industry standards or industry specifications and policies. Good quality products become standard and reliable end products that can satisfy the customers. Thus, the vendor assessment, evaluation and auditing has become the second step after sourcing the vendors. So this vendor evaluation and assessment will lead to the vendor rating, wherein vendor rating will be made in different dimensions like quality, delivery time, etc. In this session, we shall see the various issues in the evaluation of the potential suppliers. After a list of possible suppliers has been compiled by the purchase manager, the main problem faced by him is to select one among them. Now we can see the various factors which will help the purchase department manager to select a right supplier, and all these factors have to be evaluated with reference to the buyer's needs before the supplier is finally selected. We shall see some of the factors which are to be considered while selecting a right supplier. First one is the internal facilities. As the supplier holds adequate facilities in his place, will the supplier be able to supply all their requirements in time and produce the goods of standard quality required by the purchase department? Or put it in another sense, what is the specification that is required by the purchase department? Is there adequate testing facilities available in the supplier's place? What is the efficiency of the quality control department? What is the status of independency of the quality control department in supplier's place? Is there qualified and experienced people or the staff engaged in production and quality control? So the internal facilities of the suppliers plays a very good factor or a very important factor to be considered while selecting a supplier. So he must have adequate production facilities, he must have the all equipments and machineries updated, and he must produce the quality goods that are required by the purchase department as per the specifications mentioned, and the quality should be properly ensured by the quality control department, and the quality control department should not be influenced by any person in the organization, and the supplier must have an experienced personnel in technical, financial, marketing, etc. And he must have an experienced personnel also to take care of the production and quality control. The second one is the financial adequacy and stability. What is the financial condition or the status of the supplier? Whether he is solvent enough to carry on the production, or whether he faces any internal financial difficulties. If he is not able to arrange the finance to carry out the activities or the production, then he must reveal it to the purchase department manager. Suppose if there is any financial constraint or the financial difficulties faced by the supplier's place, then they may not be in a position to procure the raw materials and continue the production. So in this case, the production in the buyer's place will also get affected. So this adverse situation must be avoided, and the supplier's financial adequacy and the stability in maintaining the finance is to be calculated and is to be confirmed, and it should be given to the buyer's place. Because The financial stability and the adequacy of the supplier's place will decide about his reputation in the market and with his own bankers. Suppose he is not able to keep up the promises because of the financial difficulties, then the supplier should not get selected. Then the outlook of the supplier's place. Whether the supplier has a modern outlook and whether the supplier is interested in improving his own technology or improving his own technical know-how, and what is the existing technology in supplier's place and how the supplier is able to increase his own technical viability. And what about the personnel engaged in the technical place? Whether the personnel has an aptitude of improving their own technical knowledge, and what is the level of efficiency of the management to run the company. Whether the supplier has a separate R&D department, research and development department. If not, whether he is interested in establishing it. So the outlook of the company or outlook of the supplier's place is said to be an important factor. Whether he has an attitude of improving their own technology. Next is reputation. What is the reputation of the supplier in the market with regard to the quality, the price, the promise of the delivery dates, etc. So, if he has a proven record of supplying good quality at the reasonable price and at the prompt delivery has been made by the supplier, then he may have a high reputation in the market. So keeping his own word or keeping his own promise will definitely increase his own image in the market, and this will help the buyer to select a supplier easily if he is well reputed in the market. Next is the after sales service. Whether the suppliers are having the provision of extending after sales service, whether he has employed the maintenance engineers or the after sales staff in their own places to extend the services to the buyer's place. So this after sales services should also be taken into concern. Next is the location of the supplier. Where is the supplier located? Whether he is nearby the factory or at a distant place from the factory. Factory, here I mean the factory of the buyer. What is the representation that has been made by the supplier with regard to the sales? If he is nearby located, then the transportation cost will be less. Suppose if he is far away, then the negotiation should also be made regarding the cost of transportation also. Next is the industrial relations. Suppose the supplier is having a very cordial industrial relation, that is a relationship between the employer and the employee, then the supplier can have a very smooth functioning and he may have a continuous supply of the raw materials to the buyer's place. Suppose if the industrial relation is not that much cordial and they have the frequent lockouts or the frequent strikes or the layoffs in their own place, definitely they will have a very great impact on the production level. They may have the hampering of the production. So this shortages in the production in the supplier's place will also affect the production level in the buyer's place. So when the purchase manager is going to select the supplier, he must be very careful regarding the industrial relations existing in the supplier's place. And once again, the purchase manager has to see to it whether the supplier is a direct manufacturer or he is an agent for the products. Suppose if he is a sole selling agent, then the contract should be made accordingly. Suppose if he is a direct manufacturer, then the contract should be modified as if the entering of contract should be made with the manufacturer itself. Because if he is an agent or a manufacturer, the price level may change. The profits margins will change. So they have to go in for the negotiations depending upon the status of the supplier. A purchaser must always be very conscious that there are always possibilities of obtaining better sources of supply. These better sources, here we mean the sources from many competitive rates, better quality, the better services can be obtained now. So continuous efforts must be made to seek and find such sources. While selecting between many sources, the comparison should be made with regard to the following aspects. The first one is the technology. What is the technical quality of the product? The reliability of the product, the versatility of the product, dependability of the product. So if the product is highly versatile, if the product is highly dependable or reliable, then we can purchase. And once again, the service competition. What is the level of after sales service that is rendered by the supplier? The after sales service may be given in the form of guarantees or warranties attached to the product, and it may be extending of maintenance services also. Then the competitions regarding the prices, the price competitions, how far the negotiations are made for the prices. The next is the time-based competition. Time-based competition means the time taken for the delivery of the products. What is the time taken? Whether the supplier is able to keep up his promise in delivery dates, because these delivery dates will definitely have a good impact or a great impact on the production level of the buyer's place also. Then the buyer's convenience and the past experience, the location and the reliability of the source. So these aspects should be considered while selecting a supplier from multiple sources, namely technology, the services, the prices, the time of delivery, then the convenience of the buyer, then the past experiences with the supplier, the location of the supplier, and the reliability of the supplier. So the first and the foremost one while evaluating the supplier comes to the main factor, namely the internal facilities, the financial stability and the financial position of the supplier, the modern outlook, the upgradation of the technology in the supplier's place, the reputation of the supplier in the market, the after-sales service that has been provided by the supplier, then the location of the supplier, whether he is located nearby or far away, the industrial relations of the supplier, and whether the supplier is said to be a manufacturer or an agent, and the various factors regarding the reliability, the quality, competitive rates, etc. And the second main factor to be considered is the number of suppliers, how to evaluate. So we have to take a number of suppliers into account for the same product. There are many advantages and disadvantages in both the systems, that is having one supplier or having many suppliers. Sometimes we go in for the single supplier and sometimes we will go in for the multiple suppliers. The single supplier is selected, then there must be consistency in the quality and they must have the supply in a very continuous manner. So the dependability is very high, and if the supplier is failing to supply, then this will affect the organization, the receiver's organization or the buyer's organization. If the supplier is more than one, there is a greater dependability in the matter of supplies, in the sense that even if one supplier fails to supply the materials required for some other reason, then the production will not get affected. So when we are going to have more than one supplier, the degree of dependence will definitely vary and it will be spread over the different suppliers. If one supplier is not in a position to supply, then we can select another supplier. Then, because of the volume of the generated business and the continuity of the supplies and the effects of the various learning curves will decide about the selection of a supplier. One supplier may be able to quote the keenest price. Having two suppliers may re-motivate both of them but it is also possible that the opposite may happen to them. These factors must be evaluated before a decision is taken as to what is more advantageous to the buyer's company. Factors like the criticality of the product or its availability are said to be the normal considerations which influences the ultimate decision. So, the selection of a supplier is said to be the second main evaluation, and this supplier selection must be made depending upon the number of sources available. So, it is the buyer who is going to decide whether to have a single supplier or having more than one supplier. And normally, having more than one supplier is said to be an advantageous one. If you are going to select a single supplier, the consistency in quality should be maintained. Consistency in the delivery time should be maintained. Suppose if we have more than one supplier, the degree of dependence will get spread and the risk of not receiving the materials in time will be reduced. Then the third one is the monopolistic buyer. In cases where the company is purchasing 100% of the supplier's production, that is called as monopolistic buyer. A single buyer will be there and a single supplier will be there. Normally we call it as monosony, single buyer and a single seller. If the buyer is said to be a large size one, then they have an upper hand of purchasing the supplier's 100% production. So the supplier will supply the entire production to a single buyer, that is called as monosony. We will have a single buyer and a single seller. Normally a single tender will be given as a single supplier is there. Wherein the 100% of the supplier's production is purchased by the company, there is always a tendency to squeeze the profit level of the supplier, which is not said to be an ethical one. Because the buyer will get an upper hand and the supplier will become a dependent person on the buyer. Whatever the term of contract the buyer is going to give, the supplier has to accept it because he is going to give the 100% production. So this is not an ethical one, and all the suppliers and the buyers must be placed on par. A continuing relationship between the buyer and the supplier should also ensure that the supplier should also get a reasonable profit margin on his own sale. But this will give a good impact on the supplier because it is the actual intention of the supplier to get enough motivation to improve his own product continuously and to remain in the business. So he must also be assured with a certain rate of profit so that he gets motivated and he wants to return in the business and he has to serve the buyer. It is always better to remember that the profit is said to be a main motivational factor for the survival and growth of the supplier. Even if a reasonable profit is earned, they will get motivated and they will survive in the market. Suppose if this reasonable rate of profit is denied, then the business will tend to collapse for the supplier. Then there won't be a vendor-vendee cordial relationship. So the total attachment of the supplier to any one buyer may mean that if the buyer is in difficulties, its effect will suitably reflect the supplier also. Naturally, this will only harm his interest, and the converse is also true. So we already saw that if any problem in the supplier's place, that will affect the buyer's place. Now the reverse is also true. As a supplier is going to supply 100% for supply or 100% production to the buyer, whatever happens to the buyer's place, suppose the labor strike or the power problem or a machinery breakdown in the buyer's place, then it will affect the supplier's production also because he is 100% dependent on the buyer. So this is called as the monopolistic buyer, or it is called, otherwise called as monozoning. The next factor is share of the supplier's business. Many reputed firms try not to be more than 15 to 25% of another one supplier's business. The reason being that if their purchases represent too large a share of supplier's business, and if they discontinue a product or purchase an item from another source, they could put the supplier in very difficult situation financially. So, the 100% supply of the products to a single buyer is not advisable. He may have a maximum of 25% to a single source or a single buyer, because whatever impact that is had to the buyer's place, then that will have a impact on the supplier's place also. If the buyer is going to discontinue a particular product or a particular division, then the supplier will get affected if 100% supply is made to the buyer. So in this case, the reputed firms will definitely have only 25% of its business with a single source. Next is the agent or the manufacturer. A question may arise as to whether a buyer should purchase directly from a manufacturer or from a distributor, namely the agent or the superstockist or a wholesaler. So the buyer has to decide whether we are going to purchase from the manufacturer directly or through an agent. The agent may be any marketing middleman like a stockist or a wholesaler. Usually the middlemen in the market offer excellent services which the manufacturer may not be in a position to extend from themselves. Often stockists are available locally nearby, while the manufacturer may be very far away. The stockists have a direct interest in the customers, and his services will be usually better than the manufacturer. So in this case, the manufacturer will be relieved of the distribution system and he may concentrate on the production, wherein his finance will be fully locked up in the production and he may make a efficient utilization of the capital involved. So the stockist or the wholesaler will take the task of distributing, and they are very much experienced and they are very much passionate towards the distribution. So the customer service will be better and they may be located nearby also. So while dealing with the local stockers, the amount of time and the expenses may be less. That is, ordering cost may be less. So there is no hard and fast rule with regard to these matters, and proper evaluation decision should be taken whether to buy from an agent or from a manufacturer directly. The next point to be decided is local or distant supplier. There is an old saying in purchasing that where everything else is almost equal, buy from the local supplier. So if the price, the type of delivery, the quality is always equal, then we can purchase it from the local supplier. One of the major problems that arises from the distant supplier is said to be the increased cost of transportation, packing, insurance, the taxes, etc. Then there are usual difficulties of following a procedure again. The decision in this respect depends upon many factors, such as the efficiency of the distant supplier that is compared with your local supplier. The local source is often used to because his ability to meet the urgent purchases will be more, and the local relationship may permit the disputes, if any, to be resolved easily, because easily you can communicate with them, they can come and inspect the materials, and once again it can be solved easily. If a distant supplier is competing effectively with a local source, it may be because he is operating on a national level or specializing in a narrow area of materials or service. So he is able to effect economies of scale and probably offer a better service or quality or at a lower price than a local source. So in this case, a distance supplier can be selected. So when we are going to select a supplier, whether he is locally present or far away, that will depend upon number of factors. So all the factors are similar. Factors here among the quality of the product, the time of delivery, price negotiations, insurance cost, transportation cost, etc. All the terms of contract. If it is almost equal or similar, then the local purchase is said to be beneficial one. Suppose if the local supplier is not that much specialized one, he is not that much experiencing one in case of after sales service or the maintenance services, and we can go in for the supplier who is far away, as he may be supplying at a national level or at an international level. Buying nationally or internationally is said to be the next factor to be considered. National buying may have many advantages, and they may have the economies of scale, and they may be more efficient than the local suppliers and offer a high quality products and a better service at a very lowest price. They may also have some superior technical assistance, but they also should be proven suppliers. They should have a greater production capacity, and they may have a production flexibility also to handle the fluctuating demands. The international global sourcing is one of the most challenging aspects of purchasing and supply chain management. Perhaps it is the issue that of balancing the purchasing firm's short-term interest with the firm's long-term need to be competitive one. So purchasing nationally or internationally will be depending upon the economies of scale and the efficiency in operations. The next one is the reciprocity. Many companies have a mutual agreement with their own suppliers, whereby the suppliers purchase the goods from the buyer. When the suppliers purchase the goods from the buyers, and in exchange for the same goods, they may purchase the goods from them. That is, they have a mutual exchange of goods and services. They will have a reciprocity. The buyer will purchase something from the supplier, and the supplier will purchase from the buyer also. This mutual arrangement or mutual agreement will be made only in special cases, and such agreements will be placed only on merit basis without sacrificing the basic considerations in purchasing. That is the different arts, right price, right quantity, right quality, right time, right delivery, etc. So having all the arts of purchasing, the companies will decide whether to purchase mutually or not. That is called as reciprocity. Suppose if we have any costly or unsatisfactory purchases for whatever reason, is not a healthy management practice. However, if buyer's purchasing interest remain to be intact, there is no harm in entering into a reciprocal arrangements with the suppliers. So the reciprocity will depend upon the image and the reputation, the mutual trust they have among themselves. So the supplier must have a trust over the buyer, and the buyer must have a trust over the supplier. Only in this case they will go for the reciprocity. Next is the size of the firm, of a supplier, whether he is a big supplier or a small supplier. We have large scale, medium scale and small scale. Even the mini scale, that is a tiny scale sectors is also there. So they have their own characteristics, and consequently they may be advantageous one to their buyers. A large scale manufacturer would have a large clientele base and usually a good sales and after sales services setup may be given by the large scale manufacturers. Because of this economies of size, the large scale manufacturers would be able to produce goods at a very cheaper rates. He might have a better quality control facilities and a qualified personnel, experienced personnel in his own industry, etc. In case of small scale manufacturers, they can render personalized attention to the buyers. It will be easy to contract with them, and they are very flexible, and it is easy to deal with them, and the response to the buyer's problems will be resolved promptly, and they have a positive attitude towards the buyers. If a particular product requires any development, a small unit is said to be of greatest advantage. If the buyer gives some specifications for the development of a particular component or a spare parts, then the smaller unit will take into consideration with a special interest, and they will have intention of having the development of their own requirements. That personalized attention will not be available in case of large scale organizations. Even the government gives many concessions for the development of the small and medium-sized enterprises. So these concessions given by the government will also make them to have a cheaper price. With the view of the buyers, there may be a distinct possibility to persuade and pressurize a small manufacturer to reduce the prices. This may happen when a good percentage of manufactured goods is purchased by a single firm, that is in case of monopoly. So, selection of a supplier who is having a large scale enterprise or a medium or a small size will depend upon the requirements of the buyer. Next is the minority and women-based business enterprises. Many forces may motivate a buying firm to develop and implement the programs designed to ensure the minority or women-owned enterprises which will receive a share in the firm's businesses. So the women entrepreneurs are nowadays encouraged, and they are also forming many organizations, and they are said to be the persons who are to get many concessions from the government. So if it is 50% owned by women, then it is called as women enterprises, women-owned enterprises, which is controlled and operated by women, and there may be associations, one or more women may control it, so we can get the materials from the minority institutions or the women-owned enterprises. Next comes the green purchasing. Green purchasing is said to be environmentally sensitive purchasing, and which is said to be a good business sense. This environmentally sensitive purchasing may have two main components. One is the purchase of the materials which can be easily recycled, and the second one is the environmental issues associated with the issue and discharge of hazardous materials that may be anywhere on the supply chain. So environmentally sensitive purchasing is said to be a significant one nowadays. In any case, the hazardous materials should not be discharged as and when, that is as per the will of the organization. It should be as per the lawful restrictions or the lawful regulations of the or lawful restrictions of the country. Now when we come to the green purchasing, the buyer has to purchase the materials which are said to be highly sensitive enough, which will not affect the environment of the country or the globe. As in any area of management, a decision regarding the source of purchase should depend upon the full evaluation of all the factors pertaining to this particular case. There is no hard and fast rules, but it should be prescribed rules by the buyer. A manager's ability to decide would depend upon the facts he gathers on the issue, and he has to make a full analysis, and he or she has to place an order which are not affecting the environment. That is called as the green purchasing, environmentally sensitive purchasing. Next we pass on to the black book. The purchase section should enter in this book all the complaints and faults found in the purchasing or any mishappenings with the suppliers, the complaints that have been made to the suppliers. So with the name of the suppliers concerned and the nature of the complaints and nature of the faults found in the supply, then that will be entered in a black book. And the book is called as black because these suppliers are said to be the rejected suppliers in future, and we may call it as grey list suppliers also. Who will be the grey list suppliers and who will be the suppliers whose name will be entered in this black book? The suppliers who are not supplying up to the quality expected, that is the items of unsatisfactory quality. And then the suppliers who are charging exorbitant prices, the prices not as per the agreed terms. Then the time of delivery is not kept, the failure to give the orders within a reasonable period of time. Then quoting low prices to secure the order and subsequently increasing the prices after the order has been received. Then quoting the low prices and asking for the price revision after receiving the order. Sending the tenders in disregard to the company's terms and specifications, the tenders which are not as per these specifications. Then the quotations are sent in the unsealed covers and after the date of the opening of the tenders, that is after the last day. Then the copies of the senders and quotations is sent to many officials of the company, wherein the secrecy is not maintained. So when the products are not up to the quality and when the prices are said to be exorbitant and which is not as per the contract, then when we are asking for the revision of prices after receiving the order, then quotations are sent in unsealed covers and then after the last date sent to many officials of the companies. So who are not as per the expectations of the company, then they will be entered in this black book, and this black book will contain the complete details of the suppliers with the nature of the complaint or with the nature of the default that is committed by them. So they will be removed from the approved suppliers register which are maintained by the purchase section, and this purchase section will not deal with this grey list suppliers in future. So we call it as blacklisting of the firms which are supplying the goods which are not up to the expectations. Thus we have seen the various issues in the evaluation of the potential suppliers, namely the internal facilities available with the supplier's place, the financial condition available in the supplier's place, the modern outlook or the willingness to update the technology, the reputation of the suppliers, the after-sales service of the suppliers, the location, the industrial relations of the suppliers, the technological competition among the suppliers, then depending upon the one or more suppliers, then the monopsony, a single buyer and a single seller, then how to have a share of the supplier's business, that is having a 100% supply is not advisable. We must go in for minimum of 25% supply to the one's business, and minimum of 15%, a maximum of 25%. Then the supplier should be a manufacturer or an agent. If he is an agent, the contract should be made accordingly. If he is a manufacturer, then he has to make a contract accordingly. Because if you are going to make a contract with the manufacturer directly, the middleman will get avoided. Then the place of the suppliers, whether he is a local supplier or a distant supplier, having a national supplier or an international supplier, and going to the reciprocity, that is reciprocal purchase. The buyer will purchase from the supplier and the supplier will purchase from the buyer, and this will depend upon the reputation and the proven record of both the firms. Then whether we are going to purchase from the large scale, medium size or a small scale or a tiny manufacturers, purchasing from the women owned enterprises or the minority owned enterprises, then purchasing environmentally sensitive products, whether it can be easily recycled, and how to discharge the hazardous materials, and this green purchasing can be made anywhere in the supply chain. Then at the last we are seeing about the black book. The black book will consist of the suppliers who are not up to the expectations. That is supplying the goods at quality not mentioned in the sample or in the agreement. When the materials are not up to the quality, when the prices are at a very high level, and when the tenders or when the quotations are sent to the tenders without any seals or without any proper time maintaining in supply of the quotations, and once again the specifications, engineering specifications, the terms of the contracts are not followed. So this black book will definitely consist of the defaulting suppliers, and these defaulting suppliers will be called as grey list suppliers, and the grey list suppliers will be removed from the approved list of suppliers or approved suppliers registered by the purchase department, and the purchase manager will not deal with them in future. So these suppliers will be permanently removed from the company's records. So these are all the major issues with regard to the evaluation of the suppliers.